Thank you and welcome to our session on the primary charter. I'm Sarah Tomlinson, the person who asked the question about mice and men, and I'm a primary school teacher, and I'm one of the founding members of the Charter for Primary Education, and I'm a teacher in Lambeth in London. So for once I've had to come up north, and we started the primary charter in my branch in Lambeth, and we had a conference, a founding conference, where we had about 80 people in a primary school, where we talked about primary education, the new curriculum, and we agreed a statement at that conference because we are constantly campaigning as educationalists, and I'm an NUT officer, about what we're against, and we're always firefighting what is thrown at us, but actually what we wanted was a campaign which was something that we are for, and something that, a manifesto for what do we want to see in education. So we came up with the 5 points that are in this small leaflet, and you can take copies away. And just recently, in March this year, we produced this pamphlet, which is a collection of articles by various academics. You can see.
Take some back with you.
By Jess Edwards, who is my co-secretary in Lambeth. There's one by Terry, who's a professor of education, who's going to be talking. One by Sue Palmer. One by Richard House from Too Much Too Soon. And I think that these are a really excellent tool to use back in your schools, back in your communities, to talk to people. And I think what we've been doing where we are is going out and talking to parents, because I think parents are a really key part of campaigning about education. My bugbear is testing. I mentioned that earlier. Testing, we've been involved in trying to get rid of SATs for many, many years, and then this government has now brought in a test for 5-year-olds. And when in my school I walk past children who are 5 being asked to read words by a stressed out teacher who's kind of pointedly looking at nonsense words and trying to make a child read out a word, it terrifies me. And now that there is a question of testing children on entry into school, and a question of bringing 2-year-olds into school in order to make it a more formal structure of education, I think really, as professionals, as educationalists, and as I say, as parents, I think we need to do something quite drastic and quite quickly. If we're talking about a boycott, if we're talking about people taking their children out of school, what is happening in America if parents are taking their children out of school on days of tests. But I think we have to spread a message, and I hope that the primary charter and what we have done here, it gives people the tools to go and do that in their communities, whether that's local meetings. And I'm happy, as I know Terry is, as are other people that have been involved in this, to go around the country and to do talks in schools, in primary schools, in clusters of schools, to governors, to really say, we need to resist what we're being asked to do. The next event that we have on is we have a Lobby of Parliament, the NUT have a Lobby of Parliament on Tuesday, and by coincidence we have an event in the 6 o'clock, which is about early years, and it's going to have Ian Mearns MP, who was just on the panel there, and other MPs and lots of educationists, and Richard House from Too Much Too Soon. So we are doing lots of events that we hope you can get involved in and that you can use to go out and spread that message. So I'm just going to chair today, and I think we're going to finish. Did you have a definitive answer?
Well, I believe we're going until 5 past to give enough time.
Okay, so we're going to go until 5 past. Yeah. I'm going to give Terry about 15 minutes, Terry.
Okay, yes. If
to talk,
yeah.
And then we'll have some discussion.
If anybody, we're trying to give one to everybody, but if there's some spares, so if you want to take some back with you again off the booklet, and otherwise get in touch and order some more. Yeah, I think this is really exciting. I mean, I went down to the conference, said my 2 pennyworth, and then found myself being asked, along with various other people, to contribute to the draft of the charter. And at first, I didn't understand what was being asked for. It came from the floor of a meeting. Let's have a charter. And then I started thinking in terms of sort of Magna Carta and all that, and then I realised, what we're talking about this, what basic fundamental statements of protection for children and their education are we going to argue for? And that's why it's only 2 pages, it's only 2 sides of paper. I think it's brilliantly concise, and we'll talk about some of the specifics. I think it's been an exciting venture in terms of the sort of collaboration between teachers on the ground, between teachers working, who've worked in schools, who are working in universities, who've got a bit more time, despite all our own pressures, the teacher unions, writers such as Mike Rosen, who also had an input into this, all of these things. It's that sort of collaboration that made the 1960s and 70s such an exciting period in education, and that has been squashed since about 1990 onwards, where the Secretary of State's the only person really who gets to say anything. So I think the collaboration is important, and part of that was that the National Association for Primary Education had also been involved in this from the start. They held a 1-day conference. They brought together the 3 experts that had just resigned, those 3 chosen experts. They brought them together with a gathering in London and explained in very, very clear terms all that was wrong with this curriculum. The Science Association, Maths Association were there, and so I was involved in them transmitting that, condensing it. We produced a PowerPoint then out of that for teachers to be able to use selectively in local campaigns. So I'll just highlight just a couple of little features of that. I don't want to bore you to death in the normal required manner. Where's the device for full screen? But we make some comparisons with Finland, not to put it on a pedestal, but because there is the real irony that this top achieving country doesn't have all these mechanisms that are destroying education here. And very, very specifically, it does not treat children like battery hens to squeeze as many eggs as they can out of them before they collapse. And it doesn't, it doesn't treat teachers without any respect and so on. And the first thing that, because the Finns publish their national curriculum in English on their website, and I've got people I know over there, and the first thing is, this is all that our national curriculum says about the aims of schooling, and this is the comparator in Finland, which is followed through in the subjects with a broad humanitarian perspective. And actually, I think we lifted some of these words in the charter. I think it's the only bit that we did borrow. We're absolutely convinced that whatever Gove says about standards, cramming children at the age of 5 and 6 and 7 to be able to spell words accurately they don't even use, is not the way to improve standards. Another thing, when we did the comparison with Finland, I mean, just one example that we highlighted, and it's all in here. They actually start school 2 years later anyway. Sorry, come back to that. One of the examples, 7-year-olds. I think we got this right. 7-year-olds in the new national curriculum have got to distinguish between affect and effect with an A and an E. Do you know a 7-year-old that uses those words? Accept and accept. It's just not. It's just crazy as this. And there's a view of knowledge which I think is fundamentally wrong, that is divorced from experience, not abstract, coming into contact with real sensory experience of children, but a complete divorce. So you just learn the abstract things by rote. This is not going to do anything to improve England's PISA standing. Far from it. It's actually going to drive people towards rote learning. And similarly, classic example, algebra, we discovered that at the same time as English children are going to be expected to do subtraction sums, 5/7 minus 2/7 equals 3/7. The Finnish children are dividing up a cake into quarters. Yeah? And I think that is how you lay the foundations for fractions. It's not, you know, dealing with abstractions at a level far beyond. And actually Singapore works in that sort of concrete way in maths. The other interesting thing was when Gove said we're going to make GCSEs harder, my Finnish friends said, like Finland, I very quickly found out they don't even have GCSEs in Finland. You know, when he says we've got to make science hard in primary schools like Singapore, we found that it begins science till about the age of 9 or 10 in Singapore, and there it was actually all about the human body and the things that children are interested in. So, I don't want to spend, I will just commend this to you, the PowerPoint. It's on the Primary Charter's, website. The whole thing is completely out of balance. I mean, if you just look at the number of pages devoted to each subject, but actually the English is out of balance because it's all about spelling and grammar rules. And I'm not convinced that, I mean, by the time children are old enough to understand some of the grammar rules that are in this curriculum, they already operate on them anyway, you know, because they speak the language. And so I think it's a complete distortion. My big fear is how the hell do you avoid, in a practical situation in a school, with all these top-down pressures, how to avoid you know, the pressure to devote masses and masses of time to try to win this unwinnable race, you know, which I think is fundamentally actually about forcing primary schools to Ofsted failure and then to academy status. I think that's the real aim of it, the truth of it. So, it's a complete and utter distortion. The only area where there's been any real professional input was science, because the Association for Science Education got on board all of the big boys and girls in science, you know, the grown-up physicists and biologists and so on, pressured the government, and so they were allowed 2 days input into it. So they've shaped it with some important